Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to thinQ's New Normal webinar series. My name is Tim McLean. I'm the Director of Marketing here at thinQ, and also joined by my intrepid partner here, Matt Lamson. He's our sales engineer. How are you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. You can see I've opened up the dining room a little bit. This has been my bunker now for, I think, 61 days and counting. I see you made some changes to your dining room as well. Looking nice.
Yeah. I'm kind of in the dining room area now. Yeah.
That's great. I kind of like it here. My wife and my son are just upstairs doing their stuff. That used to be kind of my den, and so we've made room for each other. I want to say a special thanks to everybody who registered for today's webinar. For any of you who have been in any of our previous editions over the last couple of weeks, internally we really have been talking about how COVID and coronavirus have really made for a new normal. And as a cloud telecommunications provider, one of the things that we've been hearing from partners and prospects who power things like sales enablement platforms, VoIP platforms, marketing platforms, but also now, of course, distance learning platforms. And, for that, I would actually lump, even the folks like Zoom into that category, who is a customer of ours. It's really changed things. And with volumes ramping up and the needs ramping up, somebody like thinQ is really here to provide, a service both on the voice and the messaging side. And we wanted to get a special message out to update people on how each of those sort of slices of the customers that we serve, how things have changed, what the opportunity is, and also obviously the ways that thinQ can help. That's obviously why we have Matt here, our intrepid sales engineer. He really gets down into the technical details. He'll be doing the walkthrough, but I wanted to start with a quick update on kind of where we are with this new normal, like I always like to do, Matt. And I think the first thing I always like to show is this chart, which really is interesting. Like, I think when we started this webinar series, we were, around 650,000 confirmed cases. Now we've doubled that, and it's been less than a month, which is staggering to think about that. And of course, more deaths than the last 3 wars, I believe, that we fought combined, and certainly more than Vietnam. So sobering statistics. The cases continue to I shouldn't say rise. If you look in the lower right hand corner of this chart, Matt, when we started, it was right when it peaked, right? That first peak that we see there in the first webinar. And now it has not gone down. It's sort of leveled off, which is a good thing. We always talk about how we wanted to level this off and see it decline before things would open up. And we're already seeing things open up. And of course, my son is a senior in high school. His year's over. And I think most schools are making that same decision as we get, deeper into May, obviously. But I think it's important to think about how COVID and, everybody being home has changed things, especially when it comes to distance learning. So with that, just want to take a step forward here and get started on that. So really, this is a photo of an actual school. This was on their last day. So you can see how close everybody's standing. This was back in March. I believe this was March 14th when this school, Bridge Street, signed out. And I think you probably saw this, at all the schools across the country. And really what I think is important to understand is that it really is online learning's big moment. And education is really in the process of being revamped just as much as the other industries that went to remote work due to the novel coronavirus. And really, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced school districts, universities to close, send their students home. And this reality has forced, a crash course for online learning plans and technology for students and faculty. No surprises there.
Right.
So, in many respects, the education industry's move to remote instruction really rhymes with the work from home movement in enterprises. So I already mentioned video conference platforms like Zoom, also WebEx, are being used very heavily. We're seeing that across our network. And just like learning management systems like Google Classroom, Blackboard, and Canvas. These are all things I know that my son used during his high school years, but even more now that he's at home. So just like the enterprises, education's giant online education experiment is going to accelerate changes that were really already in play, right? So the only reason that universities and some school districts have been able to go remote learning is really that their technology stack has evolved a really good bit over the last 3 and even 4 years. So, and you can see here's just an example of the different trends and pieces of that technology stack that have evolved over the years as we go from left to right. And again, as somebody who was sitting in an early stage startup before it was even called a .com in '94 and actually downloaded the first NCSU web browser, I've kind of seen this entirety of this span since my career started. And it really has been amazing to me as somebody who did work in education for 11 years in an education startup to really see the early stages of online learning take hold. And now in the last 4 or 5, really see that just ramp tremendously. And this virus has really pushed things even more quickly from an adoption standpoint. So it's interesting. One of the things, my first company was called Classroom Connect. We had the Secretary of Education come to a show that we gave. I think he was out in California. And I remember her standing up there. So this would have been 1997. And she said, everybody in this room, which had about 2,000 educators from all over the country, she said, look, everybody in this room, you need to know that any new change in education takes 50 years to adopt. And if you think about it, we're only about 27 years or 26 years since then. We're only halfway through the technology adoption cycle. And again, in the last 4 or 5 is really when we've seen things really start to ramp and change. So really, a lot of people would say, and there's been a lot of articles written since March, that the technology stack for education really still needs additional improvement. It really does. It's too disjointed, it doesn't work well together, and scale is really difficult, especially when things like Corona happen. So, I think if we could sum up the category, Google Classroom is probably the biggest benefit right now. It benefits most across the K12 and the university spectrum. Canvas has an ecosystem of add-ons and a really good workflow, but the user interface still needs some work. Blackboard is very similar to Canvas with similar issues. And Apple, Google, and Microsoft all have portions of this technology stack, but the process on the back end is where online education is enabled, which what brings you here with us, today. So video conferencing and audio conferencing is really critical to the education stack. There's a big opportunity for companies like Zoom to make a play for a much younger, almost professional customer base. We've certainly seen that happening, again, since the beginning of March. And really, in the end, these learning management systems are a bit like ERP in that, they get the job done, but you aren't going to get all warm and fuzzy about them. They're not very clean or as user-friendly as they could be yet. And overall, I'd say that I'd give today's education stack about an average grade with lots of room for changes and upside. But yes, online education, as we all have seen, is very possible. And the stack works, just in time for COVID-19, again, with room for improvement. So kind of like all the biggest technology shifts and transformation efforts, the biggest challenges usually involve some kind of a cultural change. So a few items to ponder before we get into the technical side of things. Online learning really does require discipline. Education requires discipline too, but online learning has a lot less hand-holding. We have individuals sitting in front of computers. And that reality is always going to favor a certain type of student over ones that are trying to find their bearings on their own timetable. So it's something to keep in mind. Learning is and will continue to be digitized. So paper is comforting, especially for old guys like me, as are kind of overpriced physical textbooks. But both are going away. Not that any of us, I think, would miss the textbook price gouging a little bit. But this process change will mean that faculty has to go digital and change styles. And as somebody who has two brothers-in-law who are both professors, I can tell you that it was very painful talking them through some of the things that they needed to do to get set up just for Zoom. And their colleges basically told them, you have to digitize your course for the rest of the year and look at digitizing next year's. And they did not go very willingly, but they found their way despite the disjointed technology stack. But I think one of the other things to keep in mind is that analytics is going to be more prevalent. And all you really need to do is look at how analytics are being rolled out across the enterprise to see how it's now being added to, learning management systems in schools and universities. There's going to be a barrage of new learning metrics to ponder for students and faculty's effectiveness. It's going to be an interesting part of this whole education technology stack. So really the fallout in education from COVID-19 and the mass move to remote learning is going to be dramatic. And there's just going to be a few issues that are going to come up, and you can see a few of them right here on the screen right now. First is that, really this change has really shown us the K12 Digital Divide continues to escalate. The school year is already over in several states, but how is that learning gap going to be closed for those on the wrong end of the divide who don't have access to the internet or technology? And hybrid models are emerging. So, given the financial moving parts of tuition, affordability, and the cost to deliver online education, especially at the university level versus physical, look for universities and K-12 schools to start offering hybrid models, especially at the university level, to deliver a different return on investment, which is going to be very interesting in the next few weeks as they decide whether to open up for the fall or not. And I know that for a lot of you, you've seen probably one or both of these photos. This is definitely something that has been occurring. So really, the mainstreaming of remote education is right in front of us. So, COVID-19 has already pushed remote learning into the mainstream for the first time. And some institutions are going to be caught flat-footed. Some of them have. So as learning continues to go more digital, there's going to be budget upheaval ahead for administrators that they're going to have to navigate. So let's go ahead and take a step forward here. So one of the most interesting pieces of data that I've seen is that, overall, and this is Quantcast did a survey here and really discovered that Gen Z and Gen X have had the biggest upheavals in terms of their adherence to distance learning. And that's not surprising because, the Gen Z folks are the ones who are doing the actual learning at home, right? College students and K-12 students, school-age kids, and then, Gen X, and that's my cohort, as you would say, because there's a lot of people my age, in their 40s that have lost their jobs and are really using, distance learning technologies to get up to speed with new skills, looking for employment. That's the career planning on the right, but also on the distance learning side. That these are the parents of the college-age kids and their involvement with distance learning. So it's very interesting to see how COVID has changed some of these behaviors. So let's take a step forward here. So just real quick again, just to remind people. So how does that play into cloud communications and thinQ, right? So thinQ is my company, Matt's company, and we really deliver flexible, cost-effective voice and messaging in the cloud, specifically for distance learning, and about 13 other unique industries that we have customers in. And we have more than 1,200 partners who use our APIs to power, voice and messaging in the cloud. And that's what really brings us together today, and how we can help distance learning companies with their products and their platforms. So really, thinQ's platform is all about scale. So many of these distance learning companies, both unique platforms in K-12 and college level, but also folks like Zoom and WebEx, use thinQ to scale, to send more of their voice traffic across our network to make sure that they can have things like this webinar right now is going through a thinQ number that you can hear us right through our network as we speak. And what's great about thinQ is that we do offer 40 different voice carriers that can be turned on and off. Matt will show that to you in a minute. And that can really deliver up to 70% savings. And in this time of a lot of people losing their jobs, unfortunately, a lot of companies struggling, it's very important to focus on your cost of goods. So if you're a distance learning company, you want to make sure that you're paying the least possible price for high quality voice communications for your technology. And that's really where thinQ can do an analysis, which brings us to a snapshot of one of those, to really see how much our 40 carrier cloud network could save you money. So we really, the more minutes that come across our network, the better buying power that we have, and the more we can use our technology to find the lowest cost routes for your voice calls for distance learning. You see, here's an example. We have a lot of digital learning platform users who use things like Twilio, Nexmo, Plivo, SignalWire, all those different types of players. And the great thing about thinQ is that with a single code change, with a few minutes of work, you don't have to make any massive change to your code, your existing platform. You can turn thinQ on and start routing your calls across us and save money. So here's an example of somebody who was paying Twilio to send a lot of calls through their very nebulous voice network. You don't really know who they are. You don't know how much you're paying. And when we were able to compare 30 days of call data to us and say, what if you had sent those calls through thinQ instead of Twilio? Their bill would not have been $15,000. It would have been $5,000. So imagine what you could do by saving 80% in this case on your voice costs for your distance learning platform. That's what we're here to take a look at and see what we can do for you and for other people like you. So just to show, and I know Matt and I were looking at this earlier, this is really where the rubber meets the road. thinQ offers, phone numbers, DIDs, US, Canada, and you can take the existing DIDs and port them in, or you can buy new ones. And this is what shows up in a Google Meet, in a Zoom Meet, whatever your flavor of distance learning or online meeting platform. These are the phone numbers that can be routed through thinQ to auto-generate these 40, 50, 60, 70, 80% savings across really high quality carriers without any extra work on your part. It just happens in the background. So that's really how we plug into these platforms. But Matt, as we talked about last week during the SMSMMS webinar that we held, we also power things like these reminders. So we also do SMSMMS text messaging on our platform. It's also powered by APIs. So one of the big things here you can see are reminders that come directly from teachers. And I know my son would have preferred that everything in his high school years came across, his phone. And a lot of it did, both with the reminder network as well as text messaging. So that's something else that thinQ powers as well as things like two-factor authentication. So, you guys have a distance learning platform. Somebody needs to recover their password or log in. We can send those notifications as well via API. And it's another way to deliver it, through that channel, voice and SMSMMS. And Matt, with that, and again, if you could just speak into this. So here's a great example of Twilio here on the left-hand side. One way we save money is that Twilio's rates for their voice minutes are very high. They round to the nearest minute, not every 6 seconds like we do. And their toll-free is also much more expensive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And those are actually just kind of the rates for the calls themselves. That's not even including the MRRs or the monthly recurring rates as far as owning the phone numbers. Those are much more expensive on the Twilio side than what thinQ has to offer. The way that we work with these other companies is, we're not looking to replace those. Those guys are great. They do really, really amazing things. And, we're not looking to replace that. Customers have already built out their applications. What we're looking to do is we're looking to enhance and provide theoretically up to 40 layers of redundancy with carriers, for their voice traffic. Those companies, they're really good at manipulating calls and kind of creating the calls in the sense of, conferences, bridges, playing audio, going through IVRs, application setups, doing all of those things. But they just don't have the kind of carrier relationships that we do. We're doing more minutes in a month than Twilio's doing in roughly a year. So we're able to provide a much better wholesale type of rate for all of these carriers compared to the other guys.
That's right. And Matt, I totally agree. And I think you'd agree, Matt, too, that, most of these distance learning platforms, marketing, sales enablement platforms, they start with Twilio, Nexmo, Plivo, whatever it is, and it's great for when they're small. But as soon as they start to scale and those minutes and the calls per second needs ramp, that's really when they hit this wall of incredible costs that really hits their bottom line.
Absolutely. And it's the other thing too is, the fact that these companies are so big, they're just so well known. It just becomes one of those things of, we just have to do it. It's got to be Twilio because they're out there. They're the kind of most popular. They're the most widely used. And so there's that mentality of kind of, in a sense, that peer pressure of, well, everyone else is using Twilio, we got to use it too. And
right.
So there is a better way.
Yeah.
Not to take a tagline, but there is a better way.
I like it. There really is. And again, I was just going to say, we have a couple of case studies on our website that really speak into this, where people got to a certain point and they called Twilio and said, look, I can only get 1 or 2 calls per second, and I really got to get to 10, right? My solution is scaling. And they're like, fine, pay us literally several $1,000s to add that capability onto the account. And with thinQ, those costs, don't exist. You just make that one code change and we can scale up your calls per second with no added, hardware or software cost, and then get this rounding down to 6, every 6 seconds. It just really compounds. It's a nice addition, very lightweight addition that has a powerful impact on cost. Not to oversell it, but I think we did. But that's good. That is true. So just a quick snapshot, by the way, we do have an international voice carrier network. So we say we have 40 carriers. We have 5, all the toll-free, the 5 toll-frees. But we do have some international carriers as well. So we do cover actually 170 countries, but we are primarily, focused on North America, right? The US and Canada. And I'm sure everybody recognizes these icons and many more, and we'll see more when Matt goes into the platform in a minute. A lot of people call us a CPAP platform. That's entirely correct, right? So we are a communication platform as a service. So again, we're in the cloud. You can use our APIs, or of course, we have a dashboard that you can tap into if you're not doing it in that way, where we can, turn on the service for, again, we work with a lot of independent carriers, VoIP providers, enterprise folks, Twilio users, and distance learning companies as well. And really, it's all about, handling your inbound and your outbound voice calls, as well as any messaging needs that you have. Set it up, forget about it, save a lot of money, have the 40, carriers levels of, outage mitigation to make sure that you don't have outages, and just save you guys a lot of money. That's really what it's about. That is what you want out of a CPAP platform. And again, we very easily plug into all these different services and any existing application. And Matt and his team can really help make that happen. It's very simple and straightforward. So Matt's going to log in just a minute into the platform and show you how easy it is to customize your call routing in our platform, right? Let's say you buy some DIDs from thinQ, or you pour in some DIDs, and we start routing the voice calls for your distance learning platform. How can you customize those for your needs? How can you route them accurately? And of course, analyze the data. So he's going to show you a SIP ladder. So if you have any sort of an issue with a call, it doesn't sound right, something's wrong, you can do all that research on your own without filing a ticket. And Matt, I'm sorry, I'm stealing all your thunder, but that does make me excited. That's one of the things we hear all the time is, hey, thinQ, your rates are great, your technology is wonderful, but hey, the fact that I don't have to file a support ticket for some of these most basic things that I've been living with for years, that's a game changer for me. So I'm excited to talk about that. And again, on the toll-free side, we know a lot of you guys offer toll-free numbers for your platform. We are a REST-Borg, and we do have a least cost routing platform. And that's really where our software using machine learning is being very intelligent about looking at your call trends and making sure that the more wider and more distributed your calls are, the better we can route those calls, find the routes that are the least cost, but the highest quality on these 40 carriers that we've meticulously curated to put into the platform. Make sure you get everything that you want out of our system, low cost, high quality, and more completed calls. That's what it's all about. And make sure that the rates are updated several times a month to make sure you're always paying the lowest rate. That's what it's all about. That's what our least cost routing platform is all about. And Matt, we already talked about SMSMMS. It's something we've been doing now for a little bit over 2 years. Exchange text with a single API. Again, our customers really are using that application to person, the A to P messaging, channel. You can enable sending of many, tens of thousands of messages across toll-free numbers. A lot of our customers buy multiple toll-free numbers to route high-volume SMSMMS that way, get the analytics and the delivery metrics that they need. And again, we have customers in customer care, marketing, e-commerce, any kind of alert or notification, distance learning, the Zoom folks. A lot of these people are using SMSMMS in their own way, as well as VoIP. So with that, Matt, I'd love for you to kind of switch over and give us a quick glimpse inside of the platform.
Sure, absolutely. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Great. So what you're looking at now is actually our inbound portal. So this is going to be regarding, purchasing of phone numbers or porting phone numbers, any inbound traffic that you would have, as well as our SMS. This particular portal, everything you see within this would be API accessible, which could be actually our API docs. Can be found at apidocs.thinq.com. And as you can see here, we have an origination section as well as the SMS. SMS is obviously kind of one of the more current or more relevant ones for our API, because that's where all of our SMS traffic goes through. It goes through our API platform. So as you can see, it's a very straightforward, from number to number message, and then obviously we provide examples, multiple languages, everything kind of fully set up for you as you would like. As far as all of the different examples and things that you can kind of go from there. But from our inbound portal, purchasing numbers is incredibly easy. You have the ability to kind of look for blocks of numbers, toll-free numbers. You can search for you via the NPA NXX, or even all the way down to the rate center. You can purchase and go from there. The porting process has been kind of optimized over the last year or so, to where you can actually just automatically, port in the numbers from here, from a CSV file, or you can even use an API command to port the numbers now, which has been recently added, which has been fantastic for a lot of our customers. Configuration of the numbers is so simple. You have your full list of numbers. You can see what's been enabled, what's been disabled, as far as the SMS, our CNAM, as well as our E911. The other piece, as far as inbound calling, when you're actually talking about when a call comes in, we need to actually create a routing profile for that, as far as what we're going to do with that call once it hits our network. We allow actually up to 3 different scenario events. So essentially the idea here is that when a call comes in, we're immediately going to try this first option. If that fails for whatever reason, we would fall back to the second option, and then we would eventually fall back to the third option if we need to. And this is kind of a nice solution for, kind of making sure that that call obviously falls through, and or making sure that that call finally gets connected, where many other companies may just have a single routing option, and then that's it. If the call doesn't go through to that one location, then it ends up failing. We definitely did not want that to be on our solution. So yeah, that's kind of our inbound portal. We have a toll-free LCR solution, which I'd be more than happy to kind of get into at a different time. But so the idea here is, with as Tim had mentioned, we have access up to the 5 different carriers for our toll-free traffic. We would actually be able to choose what carrier that toll-free traffic goes across. For our outbound portal, as we were alluding to before, we have up to 40 plus different carriers within our network as far as what we would have available for you as the customer. Essentially this is as if you have direct connections, or you have contracts with each one of these carriers yourself. And I'm going to scroll through this just so you can kind of see, we have, as I've mentioned, this is actually our North American plans. We have all of these different carriers that are at your disposal to be able to send your calls across. What you simply do is you just simply choose to select the carriers. Now that you've enabled those, you can actually put in some restrictions or some controls as far as how you're going to manage those calls. Like we have such things as kind of a cap LCR, meaning you can actually set a max rate for those calls, so a max rate per minute for those calls. The idea behind this was to help for some of that fraud and mitigation, some of those Caribbean calls, or some of those calls that are gone, that are much higher, that if those are malicious calls that have come through, you have the ability to kind of set a cap for those. So if anything that was going to be over that cap, it'll automatically, fail those calls, and you wouldn't be charged for those kind of miscellaneous errors. So it's a great solution for that. We also have a couple other really cool solutions here. Hopefully this thing will open for me. Awesome. So this is actually one of our network diagnostics. So, for your calls when they've come through, you have the ability that you can actually, see all of your call details from the from numbers, the to numbers. You get a carrier ID so you can actually see what carriers the calls had gone across. You can see the rate for the call here. You can see the billable time as well as the total price for the call. It's a whole bunch of extra information as well. But, kind of the key pieces here that I actually want to show you, and I think I have it saved here. All right, perfect. This is actually one of the items that kind of stands us apart from all of the other companies, such as the companies of Twilio and a lot of the others. They actually don't provide this level of detail for you for your call details. Mostly because, whatever reason, whether it's they have proprietary information in there or it's things that they just don't want you to see or they don't want you to know what carriers you're actually having the traffic go across. Whatever the reason is, they actually don't provide you with this level of detail like we do, simply because, we give you access to carriers. It only makes sense for you to see where your traffic is going. Now this, if you're not familiar with this, this is actually what's called a SIP ladder, meaning you can actually see from start all the way to finish, meaning all the way to the buy commands, which is the hang up. You can see all of the traffic, all of the communication, all of the SIP calls that happen for that specific phone call. And you can see all of the networks that it goes across. You can see all of the switches, all of the carriers. You can see all of that irrelevant information. And it's a great tool to help troubleshoot if there's any issues for those specific calls. Talking about issues, we have an idea with this thing called route blocks. What the solution here is to help provide the end users or the customers with the control as far as how their calls are going to get completed. If for some reason they run into a particular carrier that seems to be having some trouble with those calls, we want to make sure that you guys as customers have access or have the ability to block those calls from hitting that particular carrier. Now, that's not to say that we're just going to take that carrier out entirely. What we actually do is we actually have a precision/surgical tool that you can actually search for the specific area code that maybe has the issue or the entire state is having a problem. Whatever it is, you actually have the ability. Let's do, as an example, 804.819. You could search for everything down from the area code and the first 3 digits if you'd like. You can go ahead and create a route block. And if you'd like, you can actually take out that carrier and it would just be done for that specific instance. That carrier would still be enabled for all of the other for all of the other phone numbers, all of the other area codes, even the same area code but a different first 3 digits. That carrier would still be allowed. But it's the ones that are having the problems and the ones that you've set up this block for, they can be turned off. The reason why this is so big and why this is such a key item is because, those companies, the Twilios, or even, whatever company you're working with, even the carriers directly, they can do this stuff. They can do these route blocks and route changes, but they don't tell you what carrier they've removed. They don't tell you who you're sending the traffic across now. They don't tell you when that old carrier is going to be reintroduced back into your network. You have no control over it. And you don't even know when they're going to be doing it for you. They have to do it on your behalf, but you don't have any idea of when it's actually going to get implemented. Here, with this solution, you're able to resolve your problem in less than 15 minutes. You're able to look through the diagnostics. You're able to see what was going wrong. You're able to create a route block for that carrier, block that carrier from making those types of calls, and then go about your day. And that's kind of one of the key components here is giving the control back to the end users or back to the customers to be able to kind of manage those things.
Yeah, it's interesting, Matt. We have a lot of examples of testimonials from customers who said, thank goodness I had ported my numbers over to you because we had an issue with Comcast or Verizon or any of these carriers in a given area. They're able to go into the platform, look at the SIP ladders, figure out who it is, what area codes or locations were affected, block them, and really get it like a large call center or any sort of a large telecom environment back up and running in a matter of minutes, or maybe 15 minutes, maybe it's 20 minutes. Instead of, you've all, I'm sure, heard of instances where where carriers have gone down for multiple days or even an entire business day in a given location, and most of the other businesses in that area had to file tickets and wait to hear back, and sometimes they weren't restored for a day. That's of course why we have backup carriers, but a lot of people don't have backup. So you can put all that aside and just realize that when things go wrong, and we know that it's going to happen eventually, you'll have the tools that you need with thinQ to do those on your own without filing a ticket, without getting on the phone, without wondering. So Matt, appreciate the tour of the system. I wanted to open it up. I see we've got a number of people on the call. If anybody had any questions, we'd be happy to answer those. Hey, Matt, I think in general, people are always asking about pricing, right? So can you kind of just walk us through exactly kind of how thinQ's pricing works? I mean, obviously it's a pay-as-you-go, right?
Yeah, it's a metered solution, meaning that it's all kind of based off of how many minutes you're sending across our network. It's not a prepaid. It's not a buy a block of minutes, and you're not going to get the announcement on the phone saying that you're almost 3 minutes from the old payphone style. You have 60 seconds to put more money in. It's not like that. It's everything's based off of meter and off of usage, and it's a great solution for that because we're able to get those kind of rates. And as we've mentioned, customers have been able to save so much more money than what they thought they could have previously.
That's right.
Yeah, it's just such a simple solution. But like I mentioned earlier too, the monthly recurring costs for owning those phone numbers, for having those phone numbers on the Twilio network or wherever, they're much more expensive. I think it's like $1 a month or $1 to purchase, or it's one of those things. It's quite expensive, where ours are fractions of that. Yeah. Even on a per month basis.
That's right. That's right. In fact, right now we're actually offering a special, we just recently changed, Matt, you did a good job of showing at least the first step in the did port-in process. We completely changed our port-in process a couple months ago based on feedback from our customers. It makes it super easy to bring large groups of numbers over to thinQ, port them, get that lower cost to park your numbers with us, and let us do the routing, for it. And, right now, as long as you're bringing over, I believe it's 20 or 30 numbers at a time to do a port-in project. We're actually kind of waiving that port-in fee. You're still going to pay the monthly MRCs and those basic fees, but it's a great way to save money to bring over blocks of numbers, especially for distance learning and applications like, video conferencing and things like that. We're bringing on a whole bunch of new numbers, so something to think about. So Matt, I know we went a little tiny bit over time, but it's always, great to have you and have you do that demo for us. I appreciate it. I think everybody else on the call did as well. And just remember, guys, we did record this session. Watch for that email either later today or early in the morning. And if you have any questions, feel free to reply. It'll be coming from me personally, T. McLean at thinQ.com. And otherwise, we really appreciate you spending, 30 minutes of your day here with us at thinQ. And we'd love to have a broader discussion with you about how we can put thinQ to work for your distance learning or really any voice or messaging application. Best way to take that next step and get a one-on-one demo with one of our experts, just go to our website, thinQ.com, thinQ.com, and click that Get a Demo link in the upper right-hand corner, and we'll get back with you right away, and we'll get started on that no obligation consultation. So with that, hope everybody's safe and sound at home, and the distance learning at home is going well if you have kids, and otherwise, just everybody else stay safe, and we'll talk to you again real soon. So Matt, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
thank you to everybody else. Yep, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you.